I am a 46-year-old female, and I have a 24-year-old son. He recently got engaged to his high school sweetheart, Fiancée, who is 23 years old, around 4 months ago. I offered to pay $17,000 for the wedding, as my husband and I are financially secure and able to afford it. My son said he would cover half of the cost, which I am happy about, but I suggested he save that money and put it towards their honeymoon instead. The problem arises with Bianca's parents. Both of them are saying that our kids do not need a wedding, and that I should give them, Beyonce's parents, the money instead because they are about to be evicted from their rental home. I've never gotten along with them. Their older son died in a car crash 7 months ago, and he used to pay their bills and rent. He left them all his money, which was a substantial amount. However, they barely even grieved him, and instead complained about not being able to go on a vacation this year. Regardless, Beyonce's parents are telling me that they need the money and Bianca would rather see them live comfortably than have a wedding. Of course, I did not tell Beyonce about this exchange, and I blocked her parents, who kept creating fake phone numbers to contact me. They never even asked Bianca for the money because she said no every time and has limited contact with them. She's only inviting them to the wedding, because my son said it would mean a lot to them since they always wanted her to get married. Their views are very misogynistic and old-fashioned. They expected her to be a stay-at-home mom, which she will not be unless she changes her mind in the future. Their last message is what made me question if I am the one in the wrong. They claimed that I baby my son, and if I truly loved him, I would not be forcing him to have such a large wedding due to his social anxiety. Throughout his life, my son has always disliked crowds and even ended up in the hospital once when he fainted during a class presentation in college. They said that if I were a good mother, I would let them get married in a courtroom or have a small wedding with just me, my husband, them, and some other close family members, instead of having 100 to 200 people there, including extended family, distant relatives, and friends. My son has expressed his fear of the wedding, but he cannot wait for it because he's been waiting his whole life to see Bianca walk down the aisle for him. Beyonce is aware of his anxiety and even offered to legally file the marriage paperwork instead of having a wedding. However, my son wants her dream of a beautiful wedding to come true, so he is willing to stand by her side during the wedding and say their vows in front of a crowd. Am I in the wrong for not helping Bianca's family and having a small wedding with just our immediate family? I do not get along with Beyonce's parents. When their son died, they didn't plan a funeral and instead forced Bianca to pay for it and host it, and then only showed up for around half of the ceremony. I was there and in tears, as even though their son wasn't the best person, he would never be able to have his life back and never see his sister get married, his daughter graduate college, or be a grandfather. Neither of our parents have disabilities. The husband was fired several years ago, and his wife never worked, so they used their large retirement funds to live extravagantly. And then when that ran out, they told Beyonce to quit college and come back to their town and work so she could take care of them. She obviously said no, so they just took their son's money until he passed. My son is adamant about not giving them any money either, as they approached him and lied, saying in their family and culture, the husband-to-be gives his future parents money every month until the wedding is a way to show he can afford to support himself and his wife. Bianca went into a rage when my son asked her if this was true, which it obviously wasn't, and he hasn't given them any money since. I paid their rent for them once or twice, right after their son passed, before he received his inheritance, which is why I think they had the idea that I would pay their rent whenever they needed it. On what planet could you be an idiot for not giving these leeches money? Wedding or no wedding, they wouldn't be getting your money? Who asks their children's in-laws for money? I'm the idiot 1,000 times. Next time they message or call, tell them bluntly that they are harassing you and that you will involve the police if they don't stop. The in-laws are toxic people. The fact that they were more concerned about losing out on a vacation than losing their son really says it all. All things considered, your son is a saint for still inviting them. I suggest you watch them closely at the wedding, in case they try to guilt trip for money from the honeymoon fund. And please make sure that any wedding cards are deposited into a locked box. I wouldn't put it past those people to steal the wedding cards with money in them. Sorry, but you are the idiot. Her parents are extraordinarily terrible people, and you and your son must stop being doormats and letting them harass your lives. Tell them to stop calling, or you will take legal action and tell your son that her parents don't deserve to be at the wedding, and to stop pressuring his future wife about it. Do you honestly think they will behave themselves? Do you honestly think they won't deliberately cause a scene? They're not actually concerned for your son. They're using his anxiety as a convenient excuse to try to get money for themselves. Both of you need to learn to be adults, grow a spine, and stand up for the people who deserve it and kick out those who don't. My mother moved me during the divorce and against my father's wishes. I was 8 at the time. She moved 3 hours away because she needed a support network. Orally, she was wrong, but I was a kid and adapted. My father started legal proceedings against my mother, which took 6 years. I would visit my father for half of the summer vacation and many holidays, but I really loved my life with my mom. When I was 14, my father basically threatened to have my mother arrested if she didn't let him have custody of me. So against my own wishes, I was forced to return to my dad's home full-time. I hated it there, and I essentially lived a separate life from my dad and his family. When I was 16, my grandfather died and left his company to his 2 sons, my dad, an uncle, and me. We all got 1/3 ownership. My dad and uncle had more kids, but my grandfather never updated the will. My family says it's because he got too old to remember. So here's where I think I was the idiot. Since I was 16, I didn't know any better, and my dad and uncle just ran the company themselves. But when I turned 18, my dad and uncle talked to me about splitting the company 50-50 between them so they could divide it fairly among all the grandchildren instead. I would get a cash payout of $300,000 for my share. But I talked to a lawyer on my own and refused to agree. In addition, I asked for my share of the profits for the past 2 years and said I'd be part of the business in the future while I was going to college. This has made life extremely difficult for my dad. My uncle is extremely resentful that only one grandchild gets a huge stake, and my dad is now paying me my share of the profits for the past 2 years out of his own pocket just to keep the peace. Am I the idiot? Maybe if I was on better terms with my father, I'd be open to their plan, but I feel that he decided to force me to give up my life with my mom, and he can deal with the consequences. Not the idiot. There might be a small moral element to this if there wasn't one huge hiccup. They didn't already have things set up to accrue my share of the profits. They were just taking them for themselves. Not to mention, I wouldn't believe for a second that they'd be planning on sharing the business with my cousins, maybe in their own wills. But either way, everyone except them would be shafted. I strongly suggest you get your lawyer to handle any further discussion of the business, and make sure you keep getting your third. Then enjoy your college experience and stay with your mother during the holidays now that you're an adult. I'm assuming the business is worth more than $900,000. The earning potential, that is. Your dad and your uncle should have been paying me for 2 years. Am I correct? Your dad is keeping the peace with his brother, but didn't care about the mother of his child or making sure I felt welcomed. Correct me if I'm wrong, but $300 is a lot of money. But if they offered that, and if your dad had the money to keep a custody battle going for 6 years when you were visiting anyway, I suspect the business is worth a lot more. I was thinking the same. Your grandfather probably didn't forget to update the will. He made a choice for you to be a joint owner of the business. I'm sure your father had his reasons for forcing you to move, but it sounds like you found a way to make the best of a difficult situation. You're a smart cookie for standing up for yourself and making sure you get your fair share of the family business. For several months, my wife has been eerily acting like a child. I understand that she's playing with our little daughter. Still, it comes across as weird to me to the degree that she plays the princess role. It's the voice and sometimes the outfits in her acting. Today, our daughter wanted a mini pizza, so she asked me to make her one. I agreed, and then my wife said, "Me too, because I'm a princess too." I told her, "No, you're an adult, not a princess." She laughed nervously and said, "Okay, never mind." Our daughter heard and said, "Dad, Mom is a princess too." I just said, agreeing, but I didn't want to have to explain to her. I felt bad because my wife changed out of her princess clothes too, but I don't know whether this ordeal makes me the idiot. The only correct response to "I'm a princess too" was, "No, you're not. You're a queen. You are the idiot, OPU. Your wife is investing herself in your daughter's imaginary play. Do you actually think your wife is delusional? Do you think she really didn't know whether or not she was a princess? Seriously, pull your head out. Of course, she doesn't really think she's a princess. Fostering imagination has many growth benefits that will help your daughter grow. Judging by this story, I'm guessing you don't play with your child at all, huh? My wife got out of her princess clothes too. Outstroke my heart. You felt the need, as an adult, to crush her joy. Princesses don't grow up and just become adults either. They're all ages. You could have said your wife was your queen, like you should have. This isn't a good example for your child. Maybe you could have played with them and all had mini pizzas. Imagination is part of children's magic, and adults sometimes get to play along. Why kill their joy? No, your daughter knows you make her mommy sad and tell her she's not magical. Too bad Up is the stick in the mud, or else he could play the heroic knight with his amazing queen of a wife who's making such fantastic court memories with her princess. Play with your kids. Adulthood is boring and overwhelming. Overwhelming and highly overrated. They'll make nice memories and offer to be their noble unicorn steed. No one is taking your adulthood seriously, and nothing bad will happen if you leave it somewhere to go play. About 6 weeks ago, I, 21, female, moved in with my friend John, 22, male. John and I have been very good friends for almost 2 years now, after I befriended him at work. 6 months ago, he met this girl, Kat, 19. He told me about her the day after he matched with her on a dating app and took me to her workplace to meet her. She seemed very lovely. I was so happy for him. Since then, John is always inviting her to every friend outing. So I got to know her. We have lots in common. And for John's sake, I wanted to be her friend. However, I think that in the nicest way possible, she can be a bit rude. She does art, and half the time John compliments her work. She says, "You hate it, don't you, sir?" when we hang out with other friends. We have to go home early because she is bored and John is our ride home. She hasn't done anything to me personally, but I just don't like her very much. I'm happy John has found someone he cares for, but having to stand by and watch how she acts sometimes rubs me the wrong way. Here's where the issue comes in. Yesterday, John and I were at the supermarket to do our food shopping. Normally, we would buy our food for the week and maybe a couple of simple frozen meals to save for Sunday. However, Kat has been coming over for dinners a few times a week, and she has a very limited diet. She refuses to eat anything other than fast food or simple frozen meals. She likely has her reasons for eating specific food, and in case it's due to an eating disorder or something similar, I don't want to make things hard for her or pry into something that isn't my business. The time where it becomes an issue for me is how John now wants to buy backup meals for her in case she doesn't like what we're cooking. This would make sense, as before she's been eating stuff that was a part of our weekly meal plan. The problem is John wants me to financially contribute to these extra meals for her. When I spoke to John about this and said how I'm not happy paying for half of her meals, he got quite agitated. He called me selfish for not wanting to help her just to save money. I know frozen meals aren't the most expensive thing in the world, but John is in a much better financial situation than I am. And while I can pay my share of the bills and occasionally have outings with friends, I don't want to be dishing out extra money for meals for a girl I have no real connection to, as these small amounts do add up. In my eyes, if Kat doesn't like what we're cooking, she could come over on a different day, or John could buy backup meals for her out of his own pocket. I feel like an idiot, but I don't think I should be paying for an extra person's food. If my boyfriend had a similar situation to Kate, I would see it as my responsibility to provide for him and his diet, and I would never expect John to pay. Am I the idiot for thinking this way? Not at all. However, it's time to take a financial and social step back from John as he navigates his new relationship. He can't expect you to help finance the fact that his girlfriend eats like a child and needs backup meals. That is their expense alone, and perhaps separate shopping is now in order as you two no longer have the same joint priorities. On the flip side, I also wouldn't continue to rely on John for rides if you constantly want to stay out with friends later. It honestly sounds like your life paths are just splitting at this time, and it's best to acknowledge that and adjust expectations of each other accordingly before bitterness sets in. I would also get ahead of any rent or living concerns sooner rather than later. If she's sticking around, it may be time to start planning an exit strategy. Who cares whether you like the girlfriend or are supportive of their relationship? That has nothing to do with anything here. John is way out of line for expecting you to finance his relationship, period. That's so over the top. It's really quite crazy. You must be feeling gaslit by John to think that you really need to explain why you don't want to cost share his girlfriend. I also take a good look at other areas with John. The entitlement he's demonstrating and your uncertainty about something as basic as this makes me suspect that John is taking advantage of you in other ways too. I share custody of a pre-tween boy, Brian, with my ex. On Friday, he suffered a grade 2 concussion after getting hit in the head by a soccer ball at school. My ex and I took him to 2 doctors, and they both said he'll be fine. He just needs to rest for a few days. He starts spring break camp next week, and they said he shouldn't go until he has a follow-up next week with his primary care doctor. This complicated our custody agreement. I was going to have my son all next week, and my ex was going out of town for a retreat. She has to go. I work from home, but sometimes I might have to go to the office, and I don't want to take my son while he's recovering from a head injury. My ex and I discussed it, and she asked if her husband of 3 years, Matthew, could take care of Brian during the day, or if I needed to work at my office. Matthew could take the whole week off. I said no, I'll figure something out. I didn't know that Matthew took that personally. I told him I appreciated and loved his willingness to take care of my son. Brian is still not 100. I have to help him in the bathroom, bathe him, dress him, etc. I don't know if Matthew would be comfortable with that. It's not like Brian just has a fever. Matthew said he would be comfortable with all of that, and it was just hurtful that I didn't accept his help. That kind of irked me, so I said, speak up next time. For all I know, my ex, your wife, could just be volunteering you. Had you come to me directly, I would probably use you. You are the idiot. Your ex and Matthew have been married for 3 years, and you share custody with them. Presumably, Matthew has been taking a father-like role in Brian's life for the past 3 years. You could have asked Brian if he was comfortable staying with Matthew alone. I expect Brian would have thought you were nuts for asking, since he's been doing it all along. I bet he doesn't even talk to the stepfather unless he has to. And when he does, he's probably the type to dismiss everything the guy says, just because he's the guy who married his ex-wife. I mean, he goes on about how he didn't volunteer personally and how he's not sure his son would be comfortable with the guy he's probably known for a while, since you know his mom married him. Did someone say 3 years? Bea, Opian. Were you always this dismissive of your ex-wife? The fact that he isn't eager enough sounds like you create drama out of thin air. I think I know why you're divorced. Your biggest concern should be giving your child the best care they need. Sometimes that's not you.